Welcome to the Brenton podcast series. An awful lot has been released in the last week or so with reference to the packaging and packaging waste regulations being discussed at EU level, often referred to as PPWR. Today we're going to have a little bit of a conversation with two leading lights from the folding carton industry. I'm joined today by Horst Bitterman. Horst is the Director General of Pro Carton, and also being joined by Mike Turner, Managing Director of the European Carton Makers Association. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining. Obviously a bit of a prickly conversation and subject matter, but Horst, let's start with a little bit of an overview. What do you feel the outlook is for the carton board and carton sector for the year ahead?
The outlook for 2023 is very positive. Of course, we are running currently in a destocking process. During the Corona times, there was a stocking process going on, and that's now going to be emptied, of course. But we have very good structural outlooks in front of us. We made a customer research each second year. The last one was done November 2022 amongst 5,000 EU citizens, and the answer was quite clear. What the most concerns them is, of course, cost of living. That has changed a little bit, but number two is already climate warming, and number three is warfare, of course. And when you then dive deeper and ask them what we can do to change climate warming, and the answer is quite clear as well. First is recycle more. Secondly is use more renewable material. And third is look about the energy. And when you think about our product, we are renewable source. We are recycled mostly. As you know, 82% is collected and recycled. And in Europe, 75% of all fibers used are already recycled fibers. Therefore, we can say quite clearly we are the king of the circularity and of the circular process within packaging.
Horst, obviously, your background, you're not just a trade association guy, obviously spent many years with Mendelhoff. And similar for you, Mike, as well. Obviously, a lot of time with International Paper and latterly GPI. But Mike, how does ECMA and how do Pro Carton? How do you look at the positions relating to PPWR?
Yeah. Okay. So we really support the ambitions of the PPWR, and in fact, the overall ambitions and aspirations of the European Green Deal, and we recognise that carton board and folding cartons are really well placed to support these ambitions. So, for example, if you look at fibre packaging overall, we're leaders in recycling. So the current recycling rate is 82%. So in volume terms, that's more than all other packaging types combined: glass, plastic and metal. But our industry is not stopping there. Through the Forever Green Alliance, we aspire to achieve a 90% recycling rate by 2030. So we're really strong supporters. It is important to remember, and that policymakers remember, that all packaging is created with a purpose to protect and preserve and promote a product, and that any loss or damage of a product has a higher environmental impact actually compared to the savings achieved by any packaging reduction. So if you look at packaging, typically it represents 3 to 3.5% of the carbon footprint of a product. So we're really strong supporters of the PPWR, just very keen to make sure policymakers recognise the contribution packaging makes to preserving food.
Horst, do you see the need for further discussions? I mean, what are the next steps from the industry's viewpoint?
for us, and we want to keep the leadership in circularity. And many countries have very well established collection systems and recycling systems, and they do not want that the regulation will destroy that. Yeah? Therefore, what we are aiming for is simply saying reuse should be complementary to recycling, yeah? And the other way around, because both are good, but you have to use them accordingly, and you have to use them science-based, meaning you have to check if reuse or recycle is better in terms of carbon footprint emission, but also in terms of water use, also in terms of transportation, also in terms of hygiene. Yeah, because it makes a big difference if you use a product, packaging once, or if you use a product more often, a packaging more often, and you have to clean it. Yeah? And we all know that cleaning is not always 100%, and therefore we have to take care about the safety and the health of our consumers as well.
Mm-hmm. Mike, Horst obviously has touched a little bit there on folding carton for food goods, whether it's food to go, whether it's fresh food, whether it's frozen food. What do you think that Pro Carton and ECMA need to do to really secure the interests of the industry?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're really focused on promoting and where we have to, defending folding cartons. So we do that either directly as our own organizations or through a coalition called Fiber Packaging Europe. Fiber Packaging Europe represents around 120 billion euros of European fiber packaging revenue. But we're really focused through these organizations on ensuring policymakers know the really superb sustainability attributes of our products and the performance of our industry. So, as an example, Dan, policymakers really need to know that, for example, forests are growing. Forests in Europe today are larger than they were 100 years ago, equates to forest growth per day of around 1,500 football pitches per day. So, as an example, we're busy and focused on making sure policymakers, when they're making policy, are well informed of some of the really positive sustainability attributes for our sector.
Horst, I'm going to move the conversation slightly towards the latest carbon footprint study. Can you give us a bit of an overview of that latest report?
Absolutely, and I'm happy to do so because we have a fantastic result here. We have reduced the fossil greenhouse gas emissions by more than 20%, and in total, when we are talking about cradle to grave, for those who are not so familiar with that, that means from the forest to the production, to the consumer, to the recycling process, and then back. And grave means basically fibers are not usable anymore. You incinerate them and use them as energy source. Yeah, this factor was 249, which is a fantastic factor, and it's the absolute lowest carbon emission of any packaging material in Europe and in the world. Yeah.
And Horst, can you identify, I mean, what areas mainly contributed to these various improvements?
Our industry is a forerunner when it comes to renewable energy. And what we have done, and therefore I'm almost more pleased, we have reduced the fossil emissions by more than 20% over the last 3 years. And that's a fantastic result. And this is basically all the things we're doing. We are investing in energy efficiency, we are investing in renewable energy, and of course, we are changing whenever possible our internal processes to gain more efficiency.
Mm-hmm. And what about forward looking? What are the areas where you think the improvements can continue to grow?
I mean, there are two things. The first is what we can do on our own. That's basically what is on our premises. Yeah? Therefore, we are moving forward investments. We are moving forward investments, especially in renewable industry, energy, on the one hand. And on the other hand, when it comes out of our doors, we have to look very closely to transport, because transport emissions are quite high. And secondly, we also have to take into account that high quality recycling is very important, that we do not have waste in our recycling streams, which cost us not only money, but also CO2 emissions, because we transport trash. And this is therefore also a call to the European politicians, that we need a working collection system, a separate working collection system, therefore a separate stream for paper and packaging in all and every EU countries. We have that in many, but not in all. And to become better, we need the support here as well.
Mike, Horst touched on something quite important there when we start talking about the carbon emissions with reference to transportation. You know, there seems to be some interesting dialogue, you know, within the PPWR when we start talking about, you know, should packaging be reused? In other words, sent back to the source where it was made? Is it going to be easier to recycle it at the point of consumption? So obviously there was a big report released recently from McKinsey, but what position does you know, ECMA and Pro Carton have in this discussion on single use versus reuse?
Yeah, well, it's very simple, Dan. We simply want to ensure that decisions on reuse or single use are based on, I guess, on evidence, science, and not emotions. So, for example, the McKinsey study that you mentioned, which was released last week, looked at switching from highly recyclable single-use packaging to reusable packaging, and they were looking at two sectors. But for example, with the takeaway food service sector in Belgium, and this report concluded, or the McKinsey report concluded, that CO2 emissions moving from single-use to reusable packaging would increase in the range of 140 to 160%, and that is driven by increased transport and cleaning requirements, and an increased use of fossil-based components for packaging, for transport, and for energy. So we really want to ensure overall that the products which offer the best environmental performance are chosen, and that there is, to be honest, an increasing weight of evidence that indicates reusable packaging. I guess it's not always the silver bullet, you know, and you know, everyone needs to be clear, is that the suggested high reuse targets that are currently showing in the PPWR, they will result in the substitution of highly recyclable paper and board packaging, moving over to plastic packaging, and that's where recycling is already a challenge. So you know, just to repeat, we simply want decisions based on evidence.
And Mike, I know obviously, you know, fast food and food to go is probably a very small part of folding carton use, but I guess, Mike, there's also ramifications when you start talking about you know, festivals and pop-up culture where people are using carton board, but then now we're talking about there's possibly going to be a ban on sort of cutlery and things like that. So I'm guessing this is a good opportunity as well for the paper-based and board-based industry to start developing systems and you know, cutlery tools, etc., for this kind of situation. So obviously there are some great opportunities ahead.
Oh yeah, for sure. There's some superb opportunities. We're seeing those already. Horst alluded to some of those in the outlook for our sector. Yeah, great opportunities. We're working with the most sustainable, recyclable packaging material that there is. So yeah, superb opportunities.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much indeed for joining me today. Obviously, we could probably sit and deep dive this for about 3 hours, but I think it's probably a case of, watch and see. This is developing literally month by month, year by year. But as Mike and Horst have both said, paper-based packaging, folding cartons, corrugated boards, we've got a great outlook. And I think really it's probably just a case of the most important thing here is dialogue. So Mike Turner, Horst Bitterman, thank you so much indeed for joining me today.
Thank you, Dan.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye.